Before the flood swallowed this land, the sky whispered a warning. The sun vanished behind a curtain of storm, and the world held its breath.
The beasts felt the coming disaster long before the humans did.
The river, lifeblood of the valley, began to retreat as if fleeing something greater. It was the last warning, carved into stone and sky. He had hunted storms and beasts all his life, but this was something different. His blood burned with curiosity, but even he could feel the world shifting under his feet.
She read the river.
They were three against a world they thought they understood. Their refuge clung to the mountainside, high above the valley, but not high enough. Life was being thrown onto the rocks, left behind by a fleeing river. She heard it before anyone else, the growl of water waking behind the mountains. He had felt tremors before, but never from the river below. The herds ascended to higher ground, leaving the valley to whatever was coming. The last light of the old day disappeared behind the storm. They could feel it in the stone and in the wind. Staying here meant waiting to die. For the first time in his life, the boy understood that curiosity could cost him everything. He had chased storms before, but never one that hunted the valley itself. She chose in heartbeats what to carry and what to leave behind, weighing survival against memory. High on the rock, they seemed safe, until the valley began to rise to meet them. When the sky finally opened, it did not weep, it attacked. The river returned, swollen with everything it had stolen from the mountains above. Even the mountain's skin began to peel away, unable to bear the storm eye's weight. Every step upward was a wager against gravity, stone, and water. The mountain did not welcome them. It merely tolerated their desperate climb. Creatures that once ruled this ground vanished like leaves in a river of stone. Between sky and water, a single misstep was enough to end a bloodline. They had escaped the first wave, but the storm had not yet finished drawing breath. In a single night, the valley that had fed them for generations was wiped from the face of the earth. On that narrow shelf between storm and abyss, they waited to see if the world would allow them another dawn. They had survived the night, but the world beneath them was no longer the one they knew. The flood was not receding. It was climbing, hungry for the last dry stone. For the first time, the boy saw the flood not as a distant force, but as something climbing toward him. Even their refuge was beginning to crumble, stone by stone, under the pressure of the rising water. Every path they once walked had sunk beneath the flood. Predator and prey were now equal in their helplessness. Even the hunters of this age were no longer in control. The flood chose where every creature would go. The flood had taken the valley. Now it was reaching for their last ledge of stone. With every handhold, they climbed not towards safety, but away from a rising death below. The stone that had saved them in the night would not save them in the day. The flood was coming for it too.
The flood was now close enough to touch. One misstep, and the mountain would not catch them.
To escape the water, they had to trust the stone, and the stone was breaking.
The river struck the mountain again and again, trying to tear them from its side. The mountain offered them a hollow in its side, a place older than the river's rage.
Within the stone, they found the bones of those who had come before, reminders that survival was never guaranteed. The world they had known was gone, but as long as they still stood together, the story was not yet finished.
For a moment, stone and flame held back the chaos, but the world beyond the cave still roared for them.
Driven by fear and curiosity, the boy walked into the mountain's throat, searching for any path the water could not reach.
While the valley drowned in dirty water, the mountain still offered a trickle of life from within.
Inside the stone, survival became a matter of counting every bite and every drop. The sky released its grip, but the water refused to follow. The valley was now a restless, muddy sea.
Sleep came in fragments, never deeper than the sound of the water beyond the rock.
At last, the water reached its highest mark, then began, slowly, to surrender. The boys stepped to the edge of their stone world, feeling a different wind, one that no longer carried only death.
Even in disaster, the river offered gifts, if one was brave or desperate.
And below their refuge, the flood turned hunters into scavengers, and the dead into the only feast left.
The first to test the new world were those who could ride the wind, not the water.
As the water retreated, it did not restore what it had taken. It drew a new line across the earth instead. When the river's anger began to fade, he stepped out to see what kind of world remained. The cave had saved their lives, but it could not feed their future. To live, they would have to walk into the remade world.
High above a scarred and altered land, their shelter watched over the birth of a new valley.
For days they had heard the world changing beyond the rock. Now they stepped out to see what was left of it. Stone had saved them, but earth would now judge every step they took.
The valley was no longer a path between forests. It had become a scar, fresh, raw, and still bleeding water. Those who survived the water now had to learn a new ground, one that hid hunger and danger just beneath its skin.
The flood had done the killing. All they had to do now was accept what it left behind. The water no longer drowned him from above. Now it waited beneath the ground, disguised as earth.
The river that destroyed the valley also fed it. Life rushed back to drink from the same force that had nearly erased it.
The flood had drawn new borders. On one side, hunter. On the other, prey. For now.
They had not escaped the flood. They had walked with it, survived beside it, and now rested on a ridge it had carved for them.
They were now only 3 small shapes stitched to the edge of a new river, following a path no one had walked before. In a valley scraped nearly clean, pockets of green still clung to the earth like memories refusing to be erased. For the first time since the flood, they took something from the land that was not left by death.
Above the flood's highest breath, new paths began to appear, written first by animals, then by the last survivors who followed them.
He knew the valley would never be the same. If his bloodline was to live, it would be in lands the flood had not yet named.
They walked away from the flood's memory, carrying only what they could hold in their hands and what the storm had carved into their hearts.
Above the flood's reach, the old forest still stood, waiting for those bold enough to climb to it. They left the scarred valley behind them and stepped under the roofs of trees that had never heard the river's rage. Life had already claimed the new world. If they were careful, they could live beside it, not beneath it.
They had once hunted the forest. Now they learned when not to move at all.
The sky still carried rain, but now it spoke in whispers instead of screams.
Far from the drowned valley, the water still moved as it always had, falling, flowing, feeding, without tearing the world apart.
He had seen water only as a killer. Now he saw it carving light into the stone.
The flood had passed, but the land it left behind was still shifting, still remembering the violence that had shaken it.
Here, the water rested before it fell. Here, the land was high enough to watch the storms come and go. With hands and stone and memory, they began to stitch a new shelter onto a land the flood had not claimed.
Hunger drove them forward, but now, every hunt was measured. Every life taken weighed against what the flood had already stolen.
They ate not as those who had been spared, but as those who had survived and knew what it had cost.
The land would remember the flood for generations, but it would not stop growing, and neither would they.
Their faces carried the river's story now. Its loss, its fury, and the thin, stubborn...
The flood had taken their valley, but not their will. On a new height, beneath a new sky, they began again.